We're going to get an overview of what Electron is all about. So to start off with, I am going to type in Electron, and we're going to go to the website. So electron.atom.io. And here you're going to have at the top the docs, which are going to be very helpful as you're learning about this. And then there's some apps over here to get an idea of what it does. So Electron is going to help us build desktop applications using web technologies. And you can see here they've got JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. So if you're not familiar with desktop technology to build those kinds of applications, you can use what you already know from web technology to create these. And if we go into the docs, and down here, let's see, we have a quick start. And this is going to really go over how the architecture is set up inside of an Electron application. And I'm going to go through this really quick so you don't have to go through everything on your own. And I'll explain how it works. So basically, this is an example setup. Now, whenever you create your Electron app initially, it's all very manual, so there's not a lot of deployment of files and things like that go on. So you have to create a folder. You can see here they've created a folder called Your App, and then what you want to do is an npm init, and that's going to give you this package.json file. So now you have one file in your folder. Then you'll manually create these other files here. And the way I like to do it whenever I'm creating an Electron app is to have an HTML file and a JSON file paired together so they have the same name. So in other words, this right here would be main.js and main.html, or if I'm going to use index, this would be index.js. And as we get into building these, you're going to see in the root folder, I'm actually just going to have this JS, and I'll push everything else into a source folder, and I start really modularizing things. All right, and so here's our package.js. Again, this is kind of created for free whenever we do our init. We're not going to go into what they're doing here. We're going to get more into the architecture. We'll walk through this when we start creating our own application. So what I'm going to do now, we're going to go through an image of how the communication works inside of an Electron application. Okay, so here's an image that really explains how things are going to work with Electron. So to start off with, you have the main process sitting here in the middle. Then as you open various windows, you get what's called renderer processes. So Electron, being a desktop app, can access resources on the system OS that, say, a web browser cannot access. But we know that Electron is built off of web technology, so basically all these renderer processes, these windows, are web windows. So what is the difference? Why is Electron able to access system resources when in fact it's just a web browser, but a regular web browser can't access the same system resources? So this is kind of where the power of Electron comes in and allows it to behave like a desktop application. So the way that's going to work is that these web browser windows are going to communicate to the main process. So when you want to open files and do lower level things that require system OS access, the web browser is not going to go directly to the OS. It's going to go to the main process, and the main process will relay the information to the OS. So that's how Electron is able to accomplish this. And this is what our communication is going to look like. We're going to go from the renderer process to the main process. And this right here is called inter-process communication. So we get a handle to an object, an IPC object, and we can send notifications, we can listen to notifications that are getting sent back to us. So here's another image, and this one is showing Node. So Node is going to be a part of what we're doing here for our Electron application to run. You can see these two windows. So if our app had two windows, these would be renderer processes. And in between, you can see going in both directions are IPC communications. And we have our main process down here, this larger block. And you can see it's the only one that is communicating with the operating system and the native APIs in the operating system. So that is how an Electron application is set up. Now, I mentioned Node, so we're going to need Node to make everything work, and I'm going to show you how to get Node now. So for that, what I'm going to do is go out to Google. We're going to do Node.js, and here we are at nodejs.org. So all you want to do here is just download Node, and you can see it's going to change for whatever your OS is. I'm on Mac, so I would just click and download the current and install it, and now I've got Node and I'm ready to go, and we're going to use Node from the command line. Okay, so next we're going to get into some IDEs you can use. Really, they're just code editors. And then we'll get into our hello world. Now we're going to talk about IDEs that you can use with Electron. And basically, they're not really IDEs because there's not a compiling environment that you can use when you're creating these Electron applications. It's more code editors. So a popular one that a lot of people like is called Atom. And you can see here atom.io. And it's a text editor. So it's got a lot of great features inside of it for doing these kind of just basically editing of your scripts. And I mentioned there's no compiling. So with a regular IDE, let's say Visual Studio and C#, you've got a place you can write your code. You can compile your application right there. You can run it right there. Now, depending on the setup, you're probably going to use an editor, then you're going to use the command line, and you'll launch your application from the command line using npm, which is a package manager. So this is one, and then there is also another popular one called Sublime. So I'm going to do Sublime Text, and here we are. So this is sublimetext.com, and you can see here another, basically a code editor. And this one here is free. You can use it with some limitations. They're going to do some prompting and different things like that. So if you pay for it, you'll get rid of the prompts because they're going to want you to buy. So they're going to periodically prompt you for that. So this is another great editor. You can also use the basic ones that come on the OS. So on Windows, I think it's Notepad. And then on Mac, you have TextEdit. Then there's things like Text Wrangler. TextPad++, I believe, is another. What I'm going to be using in the course, and I'm just going to go back to Google, is called Visual Studio Code. This is a really great editor, and in fact, I believe it was built with Electron. And this is what it looks like. It's free, cross-platform, like a lot of these are, so you can use it on multiple different OSs. And what I like here, it's kind of like an IDE, and here's what I mean. So an IDE, I mentioned you have the compiler. Well, there's no compiler here, but you do have an integrated terminal that you can launch your application right from inside of Visual Studio Code. So that's going to make it really worthwhile and have everything in one space. Now, if we go back to the Electron website and we look at apps, so we get an idea of the various kinds of apps that were built. You can see OneNote is here. We have GitHub Desktop is here. And there's a lot of them in here that were built with this. Playcode is there. And you can just scroll through quite a long list. And I'm not going to go through all of these. On the home page, there's some of the more popular ones. Let's see down here. Here we go. So you can see Atom is there. Obviously, we're on the Atom website. So that was built using Electron. Here's Visual Studio Code. It was also done that way. WordPress, Slack. Probably a lot of names here that you would recognize. All right, one other thing is the package manager that I mentioned. So if I go back out here, go to npm, and here we are, npm.js. This is going to be the package manager that we're going to use. So here you have install npm. If you don't have it already, then this will go ahead and show you how to do it. You can download Node. I mentioned we're going to use Node, so you have Node.js here, you have npm here as well. So this is certainly something we're going to use a lot. It actually launches our application. All right, so those are the different kinds of code editors to use. Now we're going to get into our Hello World application. We're going to create our Hello World application, and the first thing I want to do is create a folder. So I am going to make dir and call this M1. And change over into M1. And if I ls, you can see here, there's nothing in this folder. So the first thing I want to do is do my npm init. So I'm going to do npm init, and I'm going to do a -y, because if you don't, it's just going to run through and ask you several different questions, and you can hit enter to all of them without actually typing anything in, and just use the default responses. But I don't want to do that. I'm just going to do this, and then I don't have to worry about them. So I'll run this, and there we go. What I get now is my package JSON. Then I can go ahead with install Electron, and I'm going to do --save, because that's going to give me all the local components that I need. And actually, I'm going to need npm install Electron save --save. And so here it's downloading the various components. I'm going to get another entry inside of this directory. And this is now finished. So if I ls, you can see I've got my node modules there. All right, so I'm going to open my editor. For Visual Studio Code, it's just code space dot and hit enter. All right, so here we are. And I have my node modules. I won't need to worry about any of those. And I've got my package.js. So everything's pretty much good to go. Now, not much is going to happen here. I need to go ahead and create a file to basically help kick everything off. And this file is going to be the one that's called oftentimes index.js or main.js. So I'll just call this main.js. And I'm going to just do a log. Basically, there's not much that's really going to be going on here. I just want to get some output so we can see what's happening. So I'll save that. And I'm going to bring up my integrated terminal. And let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and just expand that out. And then here's the integrated terminal under the view menu. So to start, I do npm start. All right, so you can see here we're getting a few errors. And if I scroll up, we look through here, it's saying missing script start. So there's a few different things. It's not quite understanding what we're wanting to do. So I mentioned before that it's kind of manual when you're creating your Electron app. There's a lot you need to add in here that's not done for you. So if we go into our package JSON and look at this, you can see here it's looking for an index.js. So we can rename this file, or we can rename this reference. And what I'm going to do is actually just rename this reference to wherever our start is. And we're not quite finished. So down here under scripts, we want to add an entry. So this is going to be start. We're going to do Electron dot, which is what starts Electron. Then we need to add a comma if we're going to leave this test in there, which I am, because it's not going to make much difference. So now I'm going to run in the integrated terminal npm start. And you can see now we have a different outcome, and we also have our output down here, testing. So this really kicks off an official running of our Electron application, although it's not doing much at all. So we want to go ahead and go a little bit further than what we've done here. And for that, I am going to add an HTML file so we can have some visual output. So I am going to call this main.html because, again, I like to keep these paired together. So before we do anything inside of this HTML file, there's a few things we want to do in here. I'm going to go ahead and comment out the console. So there's some requirements we need to add. We're going to create a constant called Electron, which is going to have some functionality that we're going to want to use in this file. So I'm going to have a require Electron. All right, so that should help us out now with a few different things that we're going to want to do in here. So there's a few different things we're going to want. I'm going to create a constant, and we're going to, inside of these braces, access a few different objects coming out of Electron, and we want to set this to require Electron. All right, so in here, we're going to have app, we're going to have browser window, and you can see I'm getting some hints from Visual Studio Code about what might be possible. And eventually, we're going to have menu. We're not using it now, but we will. Okay, so I'm just going to put a comment here. This is the main process. And this code that we're typing in is available on the Electron website as well, because, again, it's kind of boilerplate code. You can copy and paste it somewhere and save it so that when you create a new Electron file, you'll have this available. Or just go ahead and save this JS file somewhere, and then you can just paste it, a new one, into your Electron folder. You can even go as far as creating something that will move the file in there or copy it into your new Electron folder. All right, so we're going to have path. We're going to do require path. Notice I'm not ending with any kind of semicolons, which you would expect with JavaScript, but because we're kind of mixing in with Node here, Node.js as well, it's not something we need to worry about. And we're going to do constant URL is going to equal require URL. So again, these requires are just pulling in functionality and putting it into these different variables. All right, so we have URL. We're also going to do let when. We're creating a global variable. I want that to stay as when for our window. And down here, we're going to go ahead with the function, create our window. So create window, and we're going to assign to when a new instance. So it's going to be a constructor for browser window, and we're going to give it a width of 800, a height of 600. All right, so that is creating our window, and we're not done. We need to go ahead and load this. So we're going to do when load URL. You can see we're getting hints again. So URL.format, we're accessing that URL that we just created above. And this is going to be open parentheses, open braces. And then in here, we're going to have path name. And actually want path name. We're going to do a colon. Now we're going to create this path join. And we're going to have two underscores, their name, comma, and inside of single quotes, whatever the file is, the related HTML file. For us, it's called HTML main. We're going to have a comma because there's a few different things we're constructing in here. So protocol, colon, we're using files, and slashes, yes, we're going to allow slashes. All right. And let's see, that should close that off. We need one more parenthesis, which comes from here. And then we're going to go ahead and do a few things for ensuring proper management of our windows. One is called when. We're going to listen for closed. And if we get it, doing this anonymous method, we are going to set it to null. All right, now I mentioned a lot of this code is coming out of the website. We're going to take a look because they have a lot of good comments, which I'm not putting in here, that we're going to kind of walk through to understand some of the management that's going on behind this. Now, one other thing we can do, if we want, is to call open dev tools. That's going to open the developer tools inside of the browser. All right, that should handle our create window. Then we are going to call app.on, or actually listen. We're going to call create window. So once everything is ready, we call our create window. And another thing we're going to do is app.on. We're going to listen for window all closed, comma, anonymous function here again. And in this, we are going to do if process.platform does not equal Darwin. Use our braces. We're going to have app.quit. And this should be a bang. So basically, if we're not on a Mac, we're going to go ahead and quit the entire application. What this means is you can close a window on a Mac. In fact, you can close all windows of an application, and the application will not close. That's why we are preventing the quit in this scenario. And there's one more thing that we're going to want coming out of app, one of the variables we declared again above. We're going to listen to activate. It's going to be another method call here. And in this, we're going to say if when equals null, create window. And that should handle it. All right, let's go look at the website. We're going to look at this same boilerplate code. Again, this is something you're going to want every time you create one of these apps. You may not want menu, but you probably want to save this file somewhere so you can make reuse of it. So if I go back to Electron, go to our docs, go down here to getting started under guides, or the quick start actually here, and scroll down. So they talk a little bit about the render process in the main, which we've covered, And here we are. So this is our main.js, and this is the code that we've actually used. Now you can see the comments here. So they want to create a global reference, which is what we did, to do better management of the windows. So the window will be closed automatically when JavaScript object is garbage collected, but this kind of prevents that from happening. All right, and so this right here is pretty self-explanatory of what it's doing. This is optional. You don't need to open the dev tools, but we're going to do it just to see what it is like. This is emitted when the window is closed. Again, this is listening. When you have this dot on, it's listening for some event, and the event here is called closed. And we set it to null. They go through and explain why they're doing that. So dereference the window object, and this is the time when you should delete the corresponding element. And then down here we have our app is fully loaded. Let's go ahead and create our window. And also quit all windows, and this is just, again, if we're on a Mac, we don't want to quit the app because you can close all windows and still have the app open. Otherwise, it will just shut down. And here again, we're doing some specific things for Mac. So on Mac OS, it's coming to recreate a window in the app when the dock icon is clicked. So that's what this is doing. And that's pretty much it for our boilerplate code. We're going to split this into 2 videos so that we can next work on our HTML side. All right, so we are going to now continue with our Hello World application, and particularly in our HTML file. So there's basically some boilerplate code we want to add to this. We're going to have our doc type HTML, and I'm going to go ahead and just speed through this particular part, creating the skeleton of this. All right, so this is our HTML file. There's a few things we're going to reference in here. So let's just do an H1, which is going to be hello world. And we're going to reference some components. So we are using Node, and this just kind of shows how we're able to access different things coming out of, say, the system level. And we're going to do document. It's going to be some JavaScript inline. We're going to have document dot, and we're going to do write. We're going to access process versions dot node, and we'll end this. We'll do a comma here and have Chrome, and again script. We want to do a script here just so there's a little bit of room, and this is also going to be a document write. So in here we're going to do process versions Chrome and close our script. We'll do comma again and Electron script, of course, document write, and in this one we're going to do process versions Electron. So we're able to get a lot of information just out of this process, and we'll close script and do a period and save that. All right, so let's try this again. We have this commented out. So the way this is going to work is that we should see our window created. It should open up the dev tools. We're going to go ahead and give that a run and see where we are. I am going to stop this that's running down here. And if I look at my toolbar, you can see I'm bringing it up. I've got Electron. I can close this, or I can stop it here. I'm going to do Control C. Again, I'm on the Mac, so that will stop it. And if we look, notice over here, it's gone now. That little Electron process is not there. So I'm going to do npm start. And here we are with our window. And also, you can see the dev tools have opened up as well. Here's our information that we printed out. And if I click the X, and you'll notice it's still running. Again, this is a Mac, so we can keep it running. And if I go ahead and close this, then it shut down here. Now, if we want to close this, and I'm going to comment out the dev tools. We don't really need those right now, just to show that it doesn't have to always open. We can change the behavior by moving this here. And if we do that, we really don't need this, and we can just comment it out at this point. So I will actually do that. I will save this. And now down here, if I go ahead and run it, npm start. So the dev tools are gone. The application is open. I'm going to click the X. Okay, so you'll notice down here we have our Electron icon. We can see our app is running. And now I'll close this. The toolbar did change up here. And down here we don't have our app anymore. So It's not the expected behavior on a Mac, but you can see just by a simple manipulation we have changed that. Now if we go over here, look at our main, we've got this main.js, which is really like a bootstrap file. It's bootstrapping our application, not Bootstrap from Twitter that does the styling. Bootstrapping meaning for a desktop app, how it kicks off everything. This is like the main entry point. It's not really related to this main.html. Now, we're going to see how to do some better modularization of our application where we actually rename some of this to make it make a little bit more sense. Now, there's another thing I want to show you while we're doing this Hello World walkthrough, and that's going to be the ability to do changes in the app without having to restart it every time. So if you make a change in this file, you save it, you'd have to shut down the app and restart it to see the changes reflected, which is not really what we want. There's a module that can help us with that. And I'm going to do an install. So we're going to do npm install electron-reload. And I'll let that run. So now we're downloading things. If I open my package JSON, we should get a modification here. All right, so that should have everything now. You can see the different components that were installed. Let's see here, if I go to the top of this, quite a few of them. All right, here we are. Electron reload. And let's see here, if we look inside of our node modules, yeah, it should be in here somewhere. All right, well, I will leave that as it is then and assume everything is there. Let's see here, go to our main. All right, so it looks like probably we'll need to add that in manually. But what I'm going to do is a quick check. So let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and start our application. All right, so here's our Hello World. And I'm going to pull our editor over so we can look at this in real time. All right, so I've got my editor resized. I'm going to relaunch this now. Get our window back. Move this over here. And I don't think it's installed yet. So if I do make a change here, so Hello World, and just do some hyphens and save this, right? So it's not being reflected over here. And in fact, in the console, we would see changed if it was there. And I think we'll have to make a manual entry here so that we are making use of the reloaded module. All right, so while we don't see our changes now, and it doesn't look like the entry that we need is there, we can go ahead and manually add that. We would add it to our main.js, whatever this bootstrap file is. For us, it is main.js. And what we want is a require electron reload, and we're going to have dir name save. And I'm going to stop this now and reload. Make sure we don't get any errors. All right, so there's a change we did earlier. We want to just see that in real time. If I go to our main now, remove all of that, save it, there it is. So now you can see the updating, and if you notice down here, that changed is there. So let's see here. We can put our exclamation mark back, save that, and that is reflected. So for some reason, I don't know why it didn't add this, but after you do the installation, which you saw at the command line, we did it earlier, you can add this into your bootstrapped file, and you'll also have the ability to then change things inside your editor and have it reflected in real time without having to reload the entire application. So next what we're going to do is look at modularizing our application.